All right. Rachel, again, thank you so much for coming. I apologize. First time we had to reschedule. I actually got a little bit of sick last couple of weeks.
No problem. Yeah, hope you're okay.
I'm okay now, feeling much better. So tell us about yourself. And I know we're going to talk about your book. I can't wait to hear about your book. Tell me how it started. Tell me about yourself. If you could a little bit introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay. My name is Rachel Zemach, and I'm deaf, but you're hearing my voice. I'm speaking. I became deaf when I was 10, so I had already learned English. I'd already learned to talk, of course, by that time. And so when I became deaf, it was just a matter of maintaining my voice. Um, Most of my deaf friends don't use their voice, so I just want you to be aware of that.
Okay.
Um, that this is a little unusual because of how late I lost my hearing. And when I finally got my teaching credential, which took me many, many, many years uh, of living a very busy life, um, I became a teacher at a school, a public school, regular public school near my home, where they had a deaf program. And they had two deaf classes in this larger elementary school where there were many, many regular classes, hearing classes. Um, and that job, I stayed in it for 10 years, and it really impacted me profoundly. It changed my personal identity, and it made me determined to write this book that I spent 7 years writing, and it just was released a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting and strange to have it out.
So, why did you decide to write a book?
Well, the things that I saw on that job were kind of mind-boggling. Um, a lot of absurdity, a lot of dysfunction, and first of all, wonderful children. The students were intelligent, hardworking, fantastic kids, and a lot of fun to teach. And they learned fast. But when I first met them, they had almost no language skills. So imagine meeting a hearing neighbor of yours who's 5 or 6 years old. You meet a neighbor that age and ask them, "Oh, are you having a birthday party at your house? It looks like you're having a party there." And they'll jabber away. They'll talk a lot. They'll tell you, "Oh yeah, my best friend's coming, and this girl can't come because she's sick, and we blah 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 blah. We almost didn't have the party," and they'll tell you a lot. But if I ask that same question to one of my students when they were in kindergarten, they first came to me in kindergarten. If I asked them, "What did you do on the weekend? Your mom told me it was your birthday. Did you have a party? Did you do anything special?" They wouldn't be able to answer the question. They would just say, "Yeah, it was my birthday." "Yeah, birthday, yes. Fun." But if I said, "Well, wait a minute, what did you do? Did you have visitors? Did you get any gift? Did you have a nice day?" If I tried to get more details, they would not be able to answer me because they didn't have the language skills. So they were miles apart from hearing children the same age with the same level of intelligence. And As a result, they have to catch up. First, they have to learn language, which I was able to teach them very easily through American Sign Language, ASL. And then they can start learning other things, reading, writing, math, etc. But that means that they have a 5 year delay mentally and linguistically, and many of them never catch up. So in this country, deaf children, deaf adults even, have severe language deprivation issues that are unnecessary. And I had heard this, but I didn't quite believe it until I started teaching. And then I saw it every day. I would see it. And I would see the attitudes of the administrators and how their attitudes were well intentioned, but totally inappropriate, totally wrong for the deaf children. And so it was like a divide between what I was seeing and experiencing with the kids in my classroom and how the rest of the staff viewed the children and what they needed. So after 10 years there, I left and I went to teach at a deaf school. And the first year I was there, something happened with one of my former students that was very tragic. And that made me more determined to try and do something to improve the system.
What
And
uh, what exactly happened? Do you mind telling us?
yeah, I, I don't mind telling you it was a suicide. And um, the boy was 16 years old and a really wonderful boy, smart and full of potential. And I met him when he was 7. He was in my class when he was 7. So I start my book talking about him, describing him, and he's kind of the thread that goes through the whole book, even though the book has many other things in it. He was like the canary in the gold mine. Uh, he's a prime example of how the educational system in this country, not just in that school, but in this country, is failing wonderful hard of hearing and deaf children. And it
I
made
think the
me
education
determined to
system
write
is
the book.
failing everyone in
Sorry,
US, especially. I think the education system is failing everyone,
yeah, that's
and I
true.
can't imagine how it would be for somebody who can hear.
That's true. So 85% of all the deaf and hard of hearing children, and there's a lot of them, the number is very high. 85% get put into regular schools. Actually, sorry, 85%, I was right, get put into regular schools where most of the time they don't have any deaf peers, they don't have any deaf teachers, they don't have anybody on staff trained in deafness.
Our
So,
schools, our schools are not required to have someone like that on staff.
you know, they many of these 85% of the kids, many of them have an itinerant teacher. So an itinerant teacher is one person who will work for hundreds of students and many, many schools. And they go to each school and see the one deaf kid at the school. And they see them for like a half hour once a week, if that kid is lucky. So they can't really impact the education very much. It's a half hour once a week, maybe once a month. I mean, there are laws and there are protections, but parents don't know these laws very often. The thing that's happening is when you have a deaf child, you usually they discover it very young, and they send you to an audiologist. And the audiologist says, okay, let me give this kid a cochlear implant surgery that will, it's a miracle surgery. They'll get their hearing back, or it will give them hearing, and we'll give them speech therapy. And you can put them in a regular school and they'll do fine. Just make them speak and learn and wear their cochlear implant all the time. So the parents don't know any better. Most of them have never met a deaf person before. All they know is that they suddenly found out their beautiful child is deaf, and they don't know what that means, really. And of course, they're nervous about the kid's future. So they take the advice of the doctor, the audiologist, especially because all of the specialists will give them the same advice. So they take the advice and they put the kid in a regular school and they put a cochlear implant on them, hearing aids. They try to get speech therapy for them. They try to tell them to talk, to listen. They put them in a regular class. But it doesn't work. And years go by with the parent not really understanding that it's not working. The kid is not really getting a foundation of language mentally. The brain is not developing the way other people's brains develop, people who have language. So it takes years before the parents finally start understanding something's not working here. And then they go talk to the teachers and they say, hey, my kid doesn't seem to be growing, doesn't seem to be able to read. I don't get it. What's going on? And the teachers say, oh, they're doing fine. They have many friends here. Everything's fine. Maybe you have to get them to wear their cochlear implant all the time at home. And, on the other hand, deaf people, deaf adults, feel very strongly that this is the wrong way to teach deaf kids. Deaf children should be in deaf schools. They should be taught ASL from as early as possible, which could be a newborn age. Sorry. They should be exposed to deaf peers. They should have a community of deaf friends, deaf adults for role models. They shouldn't be forced to live in the hearing world and be educated in the hearing world because it just doesn't work for them. Nothing against it, but it just doesn't work for most of us. But if you allow them to have a deaf identity and be in a class or a school that's full of deaf people, adults, children, teachers, administrators, all deaf, everything in sign language, you're totally changing the direction their life can go in. They can have a good life. They can have a career. They can go to college. They can have many, many friends. They can have it all if you allow them that. But the reason more people don't allow them that is they think, wait a minute, that's restricting their life, making it limited to a little deaf ghetto. That's not what I want for my child. I want my child to fit in the hearing world. And it's just an incorrect way of thinking, but it's also the natural way for them to think.
So for other people, is there anything we can do to help the situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, when you meet a deaf person in public, if you meet somebody who says, "Hey, I can't hear you," don't assume that they will lip read, but say, "Okay, how can we communicate?"
Right.
And let them tell you. And they might say, "Write everything down," or do a voice to text app on your phone. Let's communicate in writing. They might say, "Gesture, just point, just tell me the important things in gesture." They might say, "I don't know sign language. I'll lip read you, but look at me." They might say, "Do you sign?" So, whatever it is, don't be afraid of them and respect them to have the answers when it comes to communication. Don't make any assumptions because we're all different. That's one thing. Another thing is, if you meet somebody who has a deaf child, tell them about my book. you know, I mean, not to make a sale for me, but because that's why I wrote the book. I I want to give parents insight into what will happen if they're not paying attention, if they're not thinking in this new way, if they let themselves believe what the specialists are telling them, the doctors, the teachers, the administrators, the speech therapists, the audiologists, the cochlear implant specialists, if they listen only to this advice, I would ask them, is it really working? Is your kid happy? Are their language skills 100% where they should be at their age? If they had normal hearing? Are they thriving academically? Are they thriving socially? Are they really thriving socially? And then I would ask, okay, if the person says yes to all of those things, oh, they're doing great, 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 have they ever experienced the deaf world? Have they ever had a taste of it to know what they're missing? If they haven't, why not? Why are you keeping them from it? What are you afraid of? Let them try it. It's what I want parents to understand is that it's positive. The the journey I told you, the change rather that I went through when I was teaching, I went through a change in my personal identity, and what it was um, I call myself deaf with a capital D now. And I'm very proud of it. And I'm very happy that I can identify as a deaf person. Because before I would say I'm hard of hearing, I have a hearing problem, I was ambiguous. But I'm not ambiguous anymore. And it's a positive thing. All my connections with deaf people and knowing ASL and all the doors it's opened for me in my life are all positive. So they're not negative the way that all these specialists are telling parents, oh, the deaf world is very limited, it's small. My experience has been the opposite. It when a child goes from a mainstream school to a deaf school, they all of a sudden come alive and they get super happy and everything changes for them within even a few months. They change. So I've seen that again and again. And it's painful knowing that parents don't know this.
Do you think I know like a lot of websites right now have technology for either people who can't see or people who can't hear, some sort of accessibility, like it's required by government. Do you think it'll be helpful to have something like on our phones, um, some sort of technology like that for us to communicate with either a person who can hear, something required by the government?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So we have ADA laws that have been passed, American with Disabilities Act laws. And the laws are actually very powerful. They have given deaf people legal right to have access in any public setting, access to education, access to work in the workplace. But the reality is that we keep finding obstacles everywhere we go. When we try to apply for a job, if we put on the resume that we're deaf, we won't even be called for an interview most of the time. So imagine the predicament that makes for deaf people trying to find a job. They have to not mention that they're deaf. And then after they get the interview, they say, oh, by the way, there's something I need to tell you, I'm deaf. And usually the interview is canceled all of a sudden. So there's huge discrimination out there that does not comply with the ADA laws. And in the school realm, the same is true. For example, when I was in high school, I asked for an interpreter. I said, look, I like this school. I love it. There's only one problem. I cannot understand a single word my teachers say. And that's a problem. I can't understand a single word my classmates are saying in my favorite classes. That's why I'm getting F's and D's. It's not working. Can you please give me an interpreter? And I knew I had the legal right for them through ADA. The answer? No, we don't do that. We can't provide an interpreter. This was a big high school in Berkeley, a big public high school. So legally, they have to provide an interpreter. But immediately their answer was no. If you need that, you can go to another school. We can't provide it. We've never done that before. We won't do it. No. And I was a teenager. I mean, I wasn't used to fighting for my rights as a teenager. But that's the typical experience we have, despite the laws. So the laws are already there. What we need is for people to have a better attitude and to realize that, hey, deaf people have a lot to offer. And they're not disabled. It's not a disability. It's not something to be sorry for them about or even to put them on a pedestal, oh, they're deaf, but they can do this, they can do that. No, they're just regular people. The only problem they have is the fact that you don't know sign language. That's it. It's nothing to do with them. That's how we look at it. So that leads me to another answer of your question. What really would be good is if everybody knew more ASL. In this country, ASL. In England, BSL. In France, I think it's FSL. No, that's French Sign Language. In every country, there's a different sign language. My belief is that kids should be taught sign language when they're little, not just deaf kids, not just hard of hearing kids, but all kids, because they could pick it up like that. It's easy for them to learn. They learn it almost like by osmosis. If they're in a signing environment, boom, they start picking up signs when they're little. And in a few months, you've got a fluent little kid. So I feel like it should be part of the school curriculum. ASL should be taught to elementary kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, mandatory. As a subject like math and English, PE, it should be a bona fide part of the curriculum. And I have a lot of ideas for how it can be done. And then by the time they graduate, everybody is fairly fluent. So all the obstacles deaf people have in the world just disappear. Because everywhere they go, people can sign if they have to.
Yeah, that's actually a very good idea. It should be kind of like another language class that we are taking anyways. We're taking English classes, we're taking math classes. If you want to learn French, we take a French class. It just
Right.
should be another class for sign language.
Exactly, yeah. And sign language uses a different part of your brain than all the other languages. It's visual, spatial part of your brain. It's a completely different location that it's learned in. So some people have difficulty with language, and they have a lot of people who have difficulty with academics. They struggle to learn in the traditional way that things are taught in public schools. When you expose them to ASL, boom, they learn it fantastically well. And all of a sudden, they have an area they can shine in. And it's because it's a different part of the brain that is used. And it's the part that they excel in.
Yeah, I think sign language is superior to any other language in the first place because you can speak underwater, you can speak in the space, you can speak anywhere. It's the visual thing. So
Yes, you're absolutely right. You can speak underwater, you can speak through glass, you can speak at a distance, you can speak in a noisy environment. I mean,
correct.
you can be in a bar where there's everybody, there's constant noise, loud, loud, loud noise, and you can have a conversation with no problem. Easily, no shouting needed, no leaning close to each other. During the pandemic, when everybody was wearing masks, they were having trouble hearing each other too. But deaf people were fine because they're signing. So things didn't change that much for us compared to for hearing people. There's many, many benefits. And a lot of people, parents, they find themselves in the situation of having a newborn baby, they're in the hospital, the baby has a hearing test, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, bad news for you, your baby is deaf. Or, there seems to be an issue with their hearing. And the parents freak out. But if they were fluent in ASL, the parents themselves, if they even had a working knowledge because they had been exposed to ASL in school from elementary all through high school, and they'd met deaf people in the process of their instruction of ASL, and they'd seen deaf people who are artists, who are actors, who are business owners, successful deaf people. they've seen videos by these people, deaf comedians, when they were in high school as part of their curriculum. All of a sudden, they find themselves with a deaf baby, and they're not going to freak out. They might go through some grief. Oh, wow, I did not expect a deaf child. But it's not going to be the kind of grief that, is earth shattering grief that parents nowadays go through, because they are thinking, wow, a deaf child, I don't even know what that means for my kid's future. Maybe they'll never have a job. They'll never be able to go to college. They'll never get married. I mean, that's what parents are thinking. And none of that's true. So ASL in school would totally transform the experience of deaf children growing up in hearing families. And that's 90% of our families are hearing parents. Because they'd just be comfortable signing. They'd say, okay, I didn't expect to raise a deaf kid, but I know that deaf people can have great lives because I've seen it.
Right.
And
So, in your opinion, it's better for deaf children to go to a school where they're specialized in deaf children rather than going to a regular school.
absolutely, I if if the child goes to a school where there's a big deaf program that hires deaf teachers and uses ASL and has a reasonably big number of students, deaf students, then okay, that can be anywhere. It can be at a hearing school too. But I believe those are by far the healthiest options for deaf and even hard of hearing children.
So for the parents who doesn't have access to a specialized school like that, what can they do to make it better?
Okay, that's a really good question, because there are a lot of them who live far away from deaf schools. Um, Number one, learn ASL. Do not delay learning ASL. There are many ways to learn it. You can learn it online for free. You can find a tutor, which is even better, a deaf tutor. Make sure it's a deaf tutor. Hearing people teach sign language, and they often teach it wrong. Deaf people will give you the real thing. There are tutors available, there are videotapes, there are classes, there are programs. There's a lot out there. And now, due to technology, you can do it online. But don't waste any time and don't let anything get in your way. Because if you do, you may find yourself in the position someday of having a young deaf adult. Your child is now 25. Maybe they're getting married, or maybe they're 30. They have a wedding coming up. And everybody at their wedding is going to be signing. How do you fit into their world? Or what if you have a funeral in the family and you don't have an interpreter, you don't provide an interpreter? Because you don't think that way. You think, hey, your child is lip reading, they're doing fine. Really, the kid has been pretending all these years to be fine. But the kid will go to a funeral, the kid, whatever age they are at the time, will go to this funeral, how will they feel? Missing everything everybody is saying about somebody that they also loved. Or what if they are a teenager and they have a relationship that they've broken up, their heart is broken, they're devastated? You can't talk to them about it if you can't sign. If you have only been gesturing with them and making a homemade sign language with them, how can you have a deep conversation about relationships or love or how to be a strong person if you don't have a real language to communicate with them in? And yet, these things that I'm describing to you are very, very common. They happen all the time to deaf people because their parents don't sign. So even if the school is terrible, if the parents are signing, the kid will have language input at home. They will have parents that they can really talk with at home. It's so important.
How long does it usually take for average person to learn sign language, in your opinion?
It varies a lot because it depends on their motivation. What's the reason they're learning? It depends on if they have practice. Are they practicing? Do they have deaf people they can practice with? That's the best way. Are they going to deaf events and picking things up? Are they watching videos, actively trying to learn from videos of deaf people signing? Are they taking a class with an excellent teacher who is giving them activities that are really making them use the language in a real life way? Or is it just for the fun of it? That they're doing once in a while, dipping in and out of it. How are they learning? What's their motivation? But my daughter, when she was 13, I put her in an ASL class in a community college. And she was very motivated, not for me, not because her mother is deaf, which should have been the reason, and because she had a very soft voice that I just couldn't hear. So I begged her to learn signs for years. But one day I made a deal with her that she could have something she wanted very badly in exchange for becoming fluent in ASL. And she took me up on it instantly. And in this community college, which was taught by a deaf teacher at an excellent program, excellent ASL program, 3 hours a day, twice a week, within 2 months, she was able to have a conversation with me with my hearing aid off, meaning that I'm completely deaf, can't understand anything via speech. And she was signing fluently with me. So it's possible to learn very quickly if you're motivated and you have the right learning mode.
Now, has she? She's obviously has a little bit of experience before she went into the program. That might be a little faster than a person goes into the program completely not knowing any sign language.
That's true. I mean, one thing that hearing people need to understand when they learn ASL is they're learning much more than just a language.
Hmm.
ASL is a language, complete language. It has everything that any other language has, and it actually has a lot more. It's 3D, it's dimensional, it's Obviously, it's visual, it's very heavily nuanced, it's rich. You can vibrate a sign and change the meaning by vibrating it. You can do it differently physically and change the meaning. You add a lot of information with your face, with your shoulder positioning, all kinds of things that you can't do in spoken language. So it's definitely a language. There's no limit to what it can express. However, it's also a culture. It's heavily embedded with a culture, a community, a way of thinking, to some extent, a history. There's a history of deaf people, and all of these things should be part of your education. So you're not just learning a language, hopefully, as a hobby. Oh, sign language is so beautiful. I'm going to learn it so I can show it to my friends, my hearing friends. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like you're just it's just the tip of the iceberg. You're only touching the surface of what ASL really is. If you delve deeper and you learn some of the issues of the community, what are the current issues? What are their politics? What are their problems? What are their joys? Who are the leaders of the deaf community? Who are doing exciting new things right now? If you start learning just online, just read and Google, learn what's the history of deaf people. Why are deaf people so passionate about their language? Why are they so passionate about their community and culture? It's just a culture. But if you start reading, educating yourself, you will start learning a lot that goes way deeper.
That could not have been said any better. I really appreciate it. I don't know about you. I've learned so much today, and that's the reason why I do channel as well, to learn so many different things. And I think everybody could learn a little bit more about um, what other people are going through. I think this world will be definitely a better place. Um, Tell us, what's the name of your book? Where can people buy it?
Okay, I have it right here. So it's called The Butterfly Cage, and it's a memoir. I don't think I'm saying the word right. My daughter's told me to say memoir, but I can't pronounce it that way somehow. So it's available through the Paper Angel press. Um, it's a small press. However, it's also on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's on Bookshop, which is a good one because it supports independent bookstores. So you can look for it at Bookshop. Just Google The Butterfly Cage and then my name, Rachel Zemach, which is spelled Zemach. And it should pop up. And you will, if you read it, you will not just hear this kind of thing, you'll not just learn this kind of thing, but you'll learn about individual students and little stories of things that happened to them or with them. And some of them are funny, and some of them will surprise you probably. And some of them are about language deprivation issues. But hopefully, you will become fond of these individual students and get to know them.
I am definitely looking forward to reading your book. We'll go ahead and put a link down below, so everybody can just go ahead and click on that and go buy the book. I'll highly recommend, guys, everybody who's listening, go ahead and buy the book. You will learn a lot of things. I know I've learned so much today just in this 30 minutes. I'm definitely
Okay,
gonna go buy the book. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I hope you'll come back one of these days and teach us more about this subject. Again, I really appreciate your time.
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Okay, bye bye. You too.
Bye.